Hi, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll just wait a few more moments while we wait for a few other people to turn up. We will start at 7:30. Thank you. We've still got a few people joining us, so we might just give it another minute and then we'll kick off. Okay, it's just past 7:30, so we'll get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to Valley Seed's first virtual field days. Thank you for being here. I'm Jo Tanner, National Sales and Marketing Manager for Valley Seeds. Our event's held over 2 nights and 3 short videos. Tonight we'll cover your pasture questions answered. There are no questions which are silly or too complex. Our panel will start off with 3 short presentations where you can ask questions in the chat, and then at the end of the presentation, our plant breeder will join the panel to answer and take further questions. Tomorrow night will be a presentation on persistence and management of perennial pastures by the Valley Seeds plant breeder. I'll just take you through a few housekeeping points. If you refer to the slide on the screen, it'll show you how to ask questions and make sure you can see and hear everything. The audience will be on mute, so please use the question box. And if we don't get round to answering all the questions tonight, we will respond to you via email. And also the presentations will be available later on. I'll now like to introduce Donald Coles, who's the director and owner of Valley Seeds, and his wife, Elizabeth Coles.
Thank you very much, Jo. I hope you can all see me by now. Let's see. So there we go. I hope you can all see me by now. Welcome to Valley Seeds' first virtual field day. And of course, we have to hold it this way these times, but things are getting better. So hopefully we'll have it in person very soon. Valley Seeds was started in 1972 by my father. And throughout this time, we've been breeding new Australian bred pasture varieties, specifically for Australia. Throughout this period, we've been using the latest in scientific knowledge all the way through to ensure we get the best possible outcome. Australia, as you know, has the most diverse climates throughout the world. I mean, we've got everything from the deep tropics all the way through to the Mediterranean. And while temperate grasses are not used throughout the whole of the country, a fair bit of it they are. So what we've also had to look at is the extremes of climate that are occurring from time to time within those regions and causing great stress on our pastures. So what we've done as a company is we've built up more and more individual sites throughout Australia, almost too many to count now, to ensure that all of our plant breeding crosses and germplasm that we develop has a unique opportunity to express itself. And what I mean by that is it's genes by environment. When you subject your new plant crosses to these stressful climates and different climates, you get really interesting outcomes. So essentially what I'm saying here is that because Australia is unique, the days are gone when we can rely on overseas bred varieties. It's just no longer sustainable for Australian farming community. So what we've tried to do is to add these additional sites all the way from Bellingen in northern New South Wales to places like Darden up in Western Australia. And what that's done is produced a whole range of varieties and a lot more to come in the pipeline that are specifically adapted to our climate. And not only just adapted, but productive at the same time, because we've got to compete with the whole world of plant breeders out there. And I have to say, in this context, we've been testing our varieties in numerous countries overseas, and they've done extremely well, in many cases led the field. So now we're in a position where Valley Seeds is exporting to Spain, Chile, Argentina, and even the USA. Tonight, you're going to hear from a really interesting list of agronomists that are part of our team. We've got quite a large team of agronomists now. And Tanner, you've just heard from, our sales and marketing manager. She's got many years of experience in pasture agronomy in Australia and overseas in such places as the Falkland Islands. No more extreme climate than that one. Alan Mudford is one of Australia's most experienced pasture agronomists with over 30 years experience. He also owns a dairy farm on the north coast of New South Wales, so he's got his feet in the mud too. Sarah McMaster is also going to give a talk. She's our research agronomist assisting in the plant breeding team. And then that's going to be followed with a little bit of change of pace into seed quality aspects. Joseph Daniel is from South Australia. He's been with us a few years now, and he manages our seed production team. He covers areas like Tasmania and right throughout Victoria, all the regions where our contract growers produce high quality certified seed for us. And joining us, as Joe mentioned tonight, is Anthony, and he'll assist with questions along the way. But tonight is all about you and trying to improve your farming operation to make you the most profitable, sustainable operation you possibly can be. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to hand back to Joe and she can welcome our first speaker, Alan Mudford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donald. Presenting now is Alan Mudford, Regional Sales Manager for Northern New South Wales and Southeast Queensland. He'll be sharing his views on filling feed gaps and pasture planning. Thanks, Alan. We seem to have a bit of a delay with Alan. Oh, here he is.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first virtual field day. This evening, I'm going to be giving a short presentation on feed gaps and pasture planning. Most important part in your farm pasture planning is to actually have a plan to start with. Presentations overviews, what's inside your ryegrass. I think it's critical that you understand what you're actually feeding. Pasture planning and why you would do that. varieties to increase your pasture production and the periods in the year where they become critical for your farm profitability, the value of early winter feed production, and the benefits of the market-leading and mass Italian tetraploid ryegrass. What's in your ryegrass? Stocks convert cells into milk or live weight gain. Basically, ryegrasses are made up from cells. The cell walls are basically should be considered like a fuel tank. They're made up of lignins and pectins and some proteins. But basically, these fibres have got to be broken down by the rumen. The cell contents are actually the fuel that drives the livestock's potential production. It's got water, protein, sugars, starches, and fats, which all go to drive your livestock's production. These differ within ryegrass varieties. When we have tetraploids and diploids, it's simply about cell sizes. So diploids, basically 2 of every side. I won't go into all the details and maybe you can't see all the information on the screen. But basically, diploids have like 2 of every chromosome. So they're half the size of 4 cells in every chromosome of a tetraploid. Tetraploids have broader leaves and have much better stock consumptions at stages because of the fuel that's inside of them. Less lignin, which is involved in the tetraploids, which can be broken down. Both have advantages and disadvantages. Diploids, for instance, have more fibre and NDFs involved in them, which can be great when they're fed with high protein feeds such as brassicas, chicories and clovers. These can be critical at some stage of the year. Tetraploids, on the other hand, are really highly digestible and at some stages can lack in fibre, especially in the start of the season when you need to actually feed fibre when they're being introduced if they're coming off matured summer pastures. So there's not one variety and not one tetraploid or diploid that will suit your whole farm production. So the benefits of pasture fan planting. Early winter pastures. Early winter is the stage where pasture varieties on your farm can be critical to keep your production up. This can mean that you have less brought in feed, less hay, less grain. That adds more profitability to your farm. You can have better quality pastures. Whatever you can grow on your farm is really quality pasture. This adds to better profitability across your whole farming system. Pasture growth over the winter and summer. This is where a pasture plan comes in to be critical. Early winter, as you can see by the red symbols on my pasture growth map, show you that early winter is a critical period for growing pastures. When you grow through and it gets into the spring stage, where basically most farms at spring have ample pasture available on their farm. This becomes a quality aspect. This is where you do your fodder conservation of hay and silage. The quality that you make into your hay and silage during this period really does make a benefit when it comes out into the late summer and even into the autumn, into the following season when you're then planting your next season's plants. Some of the benefits, which we'll discuss now in the next section, is about why the Italian ryegrasses sometimes are really a great benefit to you. And this is in the second autumn as they're coming and developing into that second year. As you can see, you can get great advantages out of early winter feed. So what varieties might we consider to do this? Varieties to increase your total farm pasture. I recommend that not all your farms should be planted to one variety. I think you should choose the areas on your farm that are better suited to varieties that you can use. You can use varieties like fast feed rye corn, easy graze oats, for instance, planted early, even in the dry and waiting for that winter break and rains to come, and then get quickly into that early winter feed. These also can be backed up with plantings of mixtures like of easy graze oats. You might consider using annual ryegrasses with these or annual ryegrasses mixed by themselves. We have a great range of ryegrasses in the annual range of Astound, Amazon tea and fast feed ryegrasses. These will get up out of the ground early in the season and then produce through and into the springtime where then you can make silage or have plenty of early winter feed. Then we move into the Italian ryegrasses. We have Amass and Achieve. I think we have a market leader in Amass, a tetraploid Italian ryegrass that really does perform well late out into the season, which we'll discuss further. This is critical then if you're going to have perennial pasture as a base, which you may be taking up to a 3 to 5 or even 6 year period. You could use varieties like Caretaker, Cantina, perennial ryegrass blends, and these should be considered on areas that are going to be there for long-term pastures. Italians versus annuals. Why do we change? And why is it critical that we have different varieties upon our farm? It's quality and early pastures, early and late. Pasture when your livestock need to produce. Quality hay and silage production, especially with a variety like a mass. As you can see, in this instance, we have cows grazing in the foreground, where we have actually a maize crop, summer, growing in the background. These areas would be ideally suited to be planted with an annual ryegrasses, as I suggested, like Amazon tea or even fine feed or a stown. Then their season finishes up in that September, October period, where then you can then plant in your maize into that summer crop. Where if you use something like a mass, as you can see, the cows can be grazing that through into that summer and into the early next autumn. And they can last for 2 years with some summer rains or irrigations. This is critical. A mass late season production. This is a trial that was conducted by the Western Australian Dairy Association called WASP trials. Basically, in this trial, they're divided up in Western Australia, a true Mediterranean environment. They receive rains in usually around April. It was given that they'd plant in around before Anzac Day, and then that would give them feed right through until the September, October period. Typical in this Mediterranean climate, it stops raining. As you can see by this demonstration, a mass Italian ryegrass is still growing green productive leaf production, as most of the annuals and one other Italian in this trial had all ceased to grow herbage and or died out. A mass in year one can be great production. As you can see, it's a quality feed. It really does, if managed well. It's critical that you manage and graze these particular ryegrasses well. This is a great opportunity to make quality through into the late summer and into that spring, and this can make silage that goes into the next year two. In year two with a mass, this is where the real advantages come if you can get it to grow through. Increased production in the autumn due to the tiller density and establishment of its root bases, you can see on the right. The herbage and the quality that you have available coming into that early winter period on the second year growth is critical. Compared to the right-hand side where it's year one. This is because the roots are slower to establish and the tiller density hasn't been gained as in year two growth with grazing as it comes through. It may have been late to get established as the climates change and rains don't always come at the predicted time. So if we can get it to come through, the critical production can come through in that autumn in the second year when you use a variety like a mass ryegrass. So no matter what you're doing, pasture planning, and especially with a mass, can be critical no matter what your livestock production system is, whether it's sheep, dairy or beef. These are the critical times where you can add to profitability on your farm. So quick facts about a mass. As I've said, Tetraploid biennial ryegrass. It has late heading. It's excellent late winter and spring feed. It's persistent under heavy grazing pressures. Great for silage and hay when sown in the autumn, suited to a wide range of soil types, and it has strong rust resistance, which are tested in all of our Valley Seeds line in the northern New South Wales environment of Bellingham. These ryegrasses can perform across a wide range of areas, and you should add to farm profitability by using these types of systems and having a good pasture plan in your system. Thank you. I will be available for any more questions at the end of the session. If you have any questions, please lodge them now. Thank you very much for your assistance. If you need any help with your pasture plans, please don't hesitate to contact one of the Valley Seeds staff that are located across Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I've noticed we've had a few more people join since we started. I just want to point out that there is actually a control panel, and on that control panel there's a couple of things I just want to point out. One is that there is a question drop down where you can actually type in any of the questions that you may have. I can see we've already got one come in, so please feel free. As I said, there's no stupid questions or too complicated questions. There's also another section that if you drop down, it says handouts that are information references you can take from tonight, and these also will be available later. Thanks again, Alan. We'll now hear from Sarah McMaster, research agronomist, letting us know how we can minimise risk at sowing.
I was muted. I'm ready. Okay, hello everyone, I'm Sarah and I'm going to be talking about how we can minimise risk when sowing. So first of all, we start with the seed. So the seed and the germination process is actually quite complex. We have different types of plants. So we've got your monocots being your grasses and your dicots being your legumes. They have different methods of germination and require different moisture levels. So usually the seed is dormant around 12%. For a monocot to germinate, we need about 30% moisture to reach that seed. And for the dicots is about 50% moisture. Temperature requirements for most temperate species is around 12 to 20 degrees. And we need to remember that the seed and the food stores in that seed are the only thing that the plant has in its first initial stages of growth before it can start photosynthesis to create energy. So we need to take all this into consideration when planting to ensure that we have everything in place to give the plant the best chance of survival. So what are the main things we need to look out for? We've got the sowing time. So the sowing time is vital. So the perfect time to sow your temperate species is after the autumn break. So the conditions are perfect. We've got the temperatures reaching above 12 degrees and the moisture is there. However, poor autumn breaks and late autumn breaks are becoming more and more frequent. What does this mean? So farmers are typically changing their sowing times and they're sowing possibly later into the winter when the soil temperatures are decreasing, and the winter weeds like your barley grass, your poa and your cape weed, they're becoming a real problem. So you see on the right there, that's a phalaris pasture that we sowed in May in 2020, and that's just poor establishment because the winter grass has taken over. So that's just some of the consequences that can happen if you're sowing late. So how can we minimise the risk when it comes to this and have feed available when we need it? So this is your germination rate. It's all about choosing the species to grow in what scenario. So we put the species in a race and this is the order. We start with your cereals coming in first to germinate. Then we've got the annual ryegrasses, Italians, hybrids, perennials, Brom's phalaris, fescue and coxsfoot. So we classify the ryegrasses, as Alan just showed, in the tetraploid and diploids. The tetraploids being the largest seed, they're going to germinate quicker in each species group. So if you get a poor autumn break and you need that really quick feed, it's best to choose your cereals or annual ryegrass because they're going to come up and produce the most feed as quick as possible. If you then get the follow-up rains, you're going to go in with your other ryegrass species. But if you're still waiting around for the good rains and it's heading into winter, where the soil temperatures are really decreasing, then you're going to probably want to wait until the spring to sow your perennials. So the reasoning behind their emergence is the annual species, they're only around for 1 year. So they're putting their energy into growing and producing seed so they can survive, so the species can survive. But your perennials, they're around for many years. So they don't put a lot of energy in the first few years of growth because they're around for a while. So the next is your sowing depth. So it's important to know the sowing depth of the species you are sowing. So the seed size and the depth go hand in hand. So another advantage of the quick emerging cereals is they can be sown a lot deeper, up to around 5 centimetres. So this is advantageous in the poor autumn break, as they can chase the soil moisture and they're not exposed to the high surface temperatures. You also notice here you've got the Tetraploid and Diploid ryegrass seeds there. Although the Tetraploid is 33% larger, they're still being sown at the same depth. So then you move on to your perennials and legumes, and they're really small, so they're quite vulnerable to the warmer, unpredictable conditions. In terms of sowing mixtures, you are limited by the smaller seed in that mix. So say we're sowing a cereal and your ryegrass, you must sow the cereal at the ryegrass rate. If you sow the ryegrass too deep, that's going to be really affected in its emergence. So one negative of that is you're losing the advantage of sowing the cereal deeper in the dry conditions, and that could be more prone to bird attack. Another example is, say, a ryegrass and clover mix. You have to sow the ryegrass at the clover depth. So a common problem for the poor establishment is actually sowing the seed too deep, and what we'll see in the next slide. So that just demonstrates if you sow too deep, you're going to really affect the total emergence. So past the 25 millimeters for these species, you're really affecting and decreasing the emergence of the species there. Next is your sowing rate. So on average, these are sowing rates for your typical pasture species. Different species have different growth habits, so bigger or smaller, and it's all about the plant density you want to achieve. So the cereals are much higher rate due to their narrow erect habit, and things like phalaris and cocksfoot are sown much lighter because their plant size is actually quite large. One thing to keep in mind here with your diploids and tetraploids, the tetraploid being the biggest seed, you're going to need a higher rate, so about a 33 to 40% higher rate than the diploid. So if you undersow your pasture, you're going to allow space for lots of weeds to invade and take over. And if you sow too high, you're going to decrease the plant growth due to the high plant competition, which will cause low persistence. So one thing to remember when you're sowing a mix, you don't want to have the higher rate, a really high rate for a quick growing species, because that will outcompete. If you have a slower growing species in that, that's going to outcompete, and your pasture won't be established well. Lastly is your sowing methods. So now you've got your perfect sowing time, you know what species you can choose, you're going to know the depth and the rate, and you need to make sure your equipment is all set correctly. So most drills will come with a manual, and they just say, for example, set ryegrass to this. And then you go along, it could be putting out way too much or way too little. So you don't want to spend your valuable money and time getting the rate wrong, which will affect plant establishment and performance. So it's important to calibrate, check, and then continue if it's all right. So in summary, you've got your take-home messages here. So the timing. Plants need moisture and the warmer temperatures to establish well. So you need that plan in place if conditions are not in your favour. So the main message here is if the unreliable autumn breaks occur and you need the quick feed, you'll choose your cereals or your annual ryegrass. It's risky planting in the winter, so you must have a good weed program if wanting to plant a perennial, or you'll be waiting to the spring to get that established. The next is your depth. You must get that right. You need to give the seed the best chance to emerge. As we saw, if you sow too deep, it's really going to affect that emergence. And next is your rate. You do not want to undersow or oversow the species of choice. And lastly, you calibrate. So manuals aren't always correct. So you've got to know your machine and double check, and then you're all ready to go. So this is just some extra readings if you're interested. Lots of work's been done in this space. I'm also around the panel later, so ask any questions and have them ready to go. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. We're now going to hear from Joey Daniel, our production manager, on the value of buying certified seed versus common seed.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'm going to have a chat to you all tonight about why you should buy certified seed and the benefits that come with certified seed. Buying certified seed is insurance that when you buy a variety for a particular breeding trait, longevity or quick feed, for example, that the seed purchaser does have that genetic trait. With certified seed, there is only a limited number of generations between the breeder's seed and the seed that you are buying, meaning that the desired trait that you are after is going to be present in the plant. Whereas uncertified seed is often sown from previous uncertified seed, and each year this gets further away from the original genetic traits, and you may no longer be purchasing the seed that you think it is. As discussed by my colleagues, pasture planting is an excellent way to make sure that you have feed for as much of the year as possible. Choosing varieties and purchasing seed are important steps in the planting process. Let's look at a choice you might find yourself making as you head into sowing next autumn. Both varieties pictured here are Tetraploid annuals, but why should you choose a certified Amazon tea over a common such as Totila? Totila may be cheaper, but how can you be sure that the grass you're buying is of a high standard? Amazon tea or other certified Valley Seeds varieties such as Amass, Achieve, Camel, and many more have to go through the certification process in order to assure that you're buying top quality grass. For a paddock to reach certification, it has to pass 2 certification inspections from a third party, which is OECD registered. In most cases, this is done by BVAQ, formerly known as DTS Assure Quality, or Seed Services Australia, doing these inspections. These inspections occur at the 4 to 5 leaf stage, or the seedling stage, and the second inspection is done at the flowering stage. If there is more than one off-type per 10 square metres, the crop cannot be certified. An off-type is, for example, Wimmera ryegrass in a bred annual ryegrass paddock. The issues with off-types is they are not what you are paying for, and they can often be herbicide-resistant plants, which will provide poor feed for your stock. At the 4 to 5 leaf stage, off-types are easy to find when they are out of the drill lines, like the picture in the left, as opposed to the picture in the right, which I took in Tasmania earlier this year, where there was no off-types visible at this stage. On the right is a typical inspection report for a certified paddock, but as you can see down the bottom, the paddock has failed inspection due to too many off-types. This paddock actually has 20 more off-types than allowed, as there is 20 off-types per 10 square metres. At both inspections, the inspector will identify the weeds present and the pressure of the weeds in the paddock. This gives all parties involved an opportunity to be aware what weeds need to be sprayed out and what weeds may be present in the seed after harvest. From here, the seed cleaners are made aware which weeds are going to be present in the unclean sample, so they have the greatest chance of cleaning these weeds out and producing a clean final sample for the farmer to purchase. At the flowering inspection, the inspector will be looking for any plants with a physiological difference from the original plants sown. The most common off-type is finding perennials or Wimmera ryegrass in annual ryegrass, as they do not have awns and bred annuals do. The final process for the seed to pass certification is the testing of the clean seed. For the seed to pass certification, it has to meet industry minimums and maximums. The minimum industry standard for germination is 75% for ryegrass and phalaris, but with Valley Seeds, it is 90% for ryegrass and 85% for phalaris. The minimum industry standard for purity is 97% for ryegrass and phalaris, but with Valley Seeds, it is 98% for both. The maximum industry standard for other seeds is 1%, but with Valley Seeds, it is only 0.5%. This test is done on 10-tonne lines where a portion of the sample is taken from various bags in that line to ensure it is representative. This sample must meet the minimum standards, and if it does not, it cannot be registered or sold as certified seed. There are over 700 prohibited weeds in certified seed in certain states, such as camelthorn and horsetail in Victoria, with camelthorn with its sharp tip spines and the horsetail, which can be toxic to livestock. With the certification process, we can assure that these will not be present in the seed. As if they come up in the certification, they will not be passed as certified seed. As you can see in this certificate down the bottom, there was nil other seeds in both the bulk and the other seed sample. So this brings us back to the question of why should you choose a certified variety over a common? With purchasing certified seed, you can be sure that the standards for germination and purity are met. So you're going to get strong germination the following year. Also, you can be sure that the weed seeds are capped at 0.5% other seeds. And finally, you know what you're purchasing. You want your stock to perform on this pasture. With buying certified seed, you know what you're buying. Uncertified seed could have any seeds or weeds present in the bag. More weeds equals less feed, and fewer weeds equals more feed. If you are purchasing uncertified seed, you open yourself up to an array of options. There is the potential for a poor and uneven germination, as seen in the photo above. This uneven germination leads to an uneven grazing and poorly established pasture for years to come. Also, as I've pointed out before, there is the potential for impure seed that has the potential, which contains potential detrimental weeds. Overall, the key message is, in the future when you are doing your pasture planning, think about the benefits of purchasing certified seed. If you choose the cheaper seed at purchase, it will cost you money all year. It will potentially cost you money all year with an increased risk of having to buy in feed and increased weed management costs. So next time you're buying seed, be sure to keep an eye out for these green and blue tags Also, read the back of the tags, because the minimum standards vary between companies, and you want to be sure that you're purchasing seed that is of a high standard to give you the best performance. Thank you. I'll be in the panel later if you have any questions.
Thank you, Joey. We'll now invite Anthony Ledden, our plant breeder, to join the panel. A reminder, Anthony will be presenting tomorrow night on persistence and management of perennial pastures, and there is still time to reserve your seat, as some people have registered for only one seminar. Okay, so we've got a few questions that have been put to the panel, and we'll go through them now. Please feel free to add anything. So firstly, we'll start with, and I might put this question to Alan. When should I choose a Diploid over a Tetraploid?
Depends on the stock and the environment that you're going to be actually using it. I don't think there's a simple choice of whether you should just use a Diploid or a Tetraploid. Diploids can be great as far as grazing management's concerning, better suited maybe to set stocking, and even at stages they can be better off because their tiller densities in certain environments, whether it be either drier conditions, even sometimes in wet conditions, where the tiller densities are really critical with the Diploid. Hence, then the other advantages of your Tetraploids are that you get better stock utilisation, and they do contain a lot more soluble carbohydrates, which then can add to your livestock production system. I think it depends on what farming system you actually have, is what variety you choose. There's no dead set, one is better than the other. The system is what's your farming practices like, and that's where you need to have a good farm plan and consult an agronomist or your store agronomist or even one of our Valley Seeds, and we can help discuss and try to get the right variety and Diploid or Tetraploid to suit your farming system.
Thanks for that. The next question, Sarah, I'll pose to you. The Tetraploid ryegrass sowing rate of 25 to 40 seems a large range. Does sowing rate change based on the season start or the assumed rainfall available through the season?
Well, you're typically, so you want the plant numbers. The Tetraploid is the largest seed, so it's always going to be the higher rate than a Diploid. But Anthony do you have any other answers? Depending on rainfall?
It really depends on the farmer. So depending on the rate, you've got mixes of clovers and so forth. If I had a Diploid mixed with clovers, I might say the Diploid at about 20 kilos per hectare. Then if I had a Tetraploid, you should be putting that in at 33% higher sowing rates than what you would a Diploid in your environment. So whatever environment you're in and whatever you sow your Diploids at in that environment, just increase the sowing rate by 33%. If some people actually go higher with the Tetraploids, I've known some people to double the sowing rate of a Diploid for the Tetraploid. So it really, you'll know the feel of your environment. Once you start going above double the sowing rate, you start to see a decrease in the value of doing that. So they've shown with research in the past that you can have much higher increase in yield up to a point of where you have double the sowing rate of the Diploids or Tetraploids, and then once you go past that point, then there's a decreasing value of that. So know your environment and also the way that you're sowing, whether you're sowing with a seed drill or broadcasting seed out. If you're broadcasting seed, you'll definitely sow at those higher rates of the 40 to 50 kilograms per hectare.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony.
Ellen, I might direct this one to you because it's for someone on the mid-north coast. A question on a mass. I've managed to get it to late February consistently. Would you recommend management to get it to pull over the last part of February. Over the heat, do you think I should keep moisture up, or do you think it would do more harm, e.g. boiling it?
Critical issue is, I suppose, as you come up into the northern environment of Australia, it's probably not so much about moisture that's the problem. The problem actually is that the nighttime temperatures don't decrease to a low enough level that the plants can exchange their carbohydrates. So what happens, especially into that February period, we would have nighttime temperatures that would exceed in 20 degrees, where the ryegrass don't exchange their carbohydrates until they drop down to around that 16, 17 degrees of a night time, where on the coastal environments, especially if you're on the, say, the tablelands, you may get that opportunity where moisture will give that compensation. Unfortunately, on the northern coastal zones of New South Wales, if we're having temperatures at night time that aren't dropping below, especially that 20 degrees, where you have hot, humid nights, unfortunately, the plant can't exchange its carbohydrates, and that's where it gets under its critical stress levels, and that's where you lose a lot of those plants during that season. Unfortunately, that's one of the disadvantages of being in the high environment heat temperatures of northern New South Wales.
Okay, next question. And this is about uncertified seed. So Joey, we'll get you to look at this one. You mentioned uncertified seed may have seed resistant to chemicals. Is ryegrass resistance in ryegrass an issue?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, if you could, ryegrass resistant is certainly an issue. Yeah, all over Australia, and that's the point that I'm trying to get across there. When you're purchasing certified seed, uncertified seed, this seed could be harvested from anywhere, and it could have anything in it, and very well could have resistant ryegrass. And then you're going out and you're planting this uncertified ryegrass, and then you're essentially just planting more resistant ryegrass on your farm. And as we know that, yeah, a lot of ryegrasses are definitely resistant, herbicide group resistant A now, and yeah, they're definitely honing into a lot of other groups as well. So yeah, that is a big issue with uncertified grass.
Thanks for that. While I've got you on there, the question was raised earlier about, is there any warranty on certified seed or uncertified seed?
So the warranty that you have is what I showed you before about the analysis certificate, when I alluded to the fact that had nil weeds present. With any seed that you purchase with any seed company, and Valley Seeds especially, you can ask to have that analysis certificate provided. So when you purchase seed, you can go, I'd like to know the germination and the purity of this, and also what other weeds are present, and then we can give you that information. So then you are sure that you know the seed that you're purchasing is actually the seed that you are purchasing, per se.
Okay. So this one, Sarah's back to you. What should I do if I want to sow ryegrass and oats together?
Yeah, so that's actually a fairly common practice, but like I showed in my diagram, you have to sow the cereal at the ryegrass rate. You can't be sowing the ryegrass down the 5 centimetres. So some issues with that could be the birds could get the cereals. They love cereal. So you've got a few options. You can possibly choose like a black coated cereal. There's a few on the market there. So, but you also got to remember that if you're experiencing those dry climates, you're actually losing the benefit of just sowing the cereal on its own, because you can sow that a bit deeper than the ryegrass.
Thanks for that. That appears to be all the questions. Oh, hang on. Sorry, another one. Question for Alan, feed gaps. Can you elaborate on the variety and types, including in the slide, and how I could use the different varieties through the years?
Yep, I think it's about, this is where the critical time about farm planning all comes into aspects. I think where you look at your farm, if you were to look at your farm, unless you're on a very good block, you all have different areas within your farm system. Annuals and most of the systems where you'd have, maybe you have ridgy country or country that dries out quicker, or alternatively you're going to crop, that's where you'd be using an annual ryegrass in those situations. Take advantage of the winter moistures, which then would take you through. Usually then if you don't get spring rains on some of that type of ridgy type country or country that isn't as high in fertility, that's where it'd be really well suited to. Then you would choose other areas on your farm, maybe the creek flats or some higher fertility areas, maybe some areas where you have irrigation available to you. And that's where you would use your Italians or your perennial type systems that it would take advantage of that moisture, higher nutrition. And then those areas on your farm would be the later production, where that's where a good farm plan comes into play. Because if you assess what areas on your farm and the soil types and the fertility of these regions, you pick a variety that suits those areas on your farm and you plant them. Whether it's, you know, like an early feed, like as I said, if you want an early feed early, that's where the cereals come into play, the fast feed rye corns or your oats, because they get up out of the ground. They're only providing feed for that first 8 to 12 weeks. In a lot of cases, it's only 1 to 2 grazings, with the exception of easy graze oats, where we've had people that have grazed it right through the season 5 and 6 times. That's where it's really critical that you have a farm planning system. And as you go, as you plant your Italians later into the season, then they became more viable. That's where you pick the areas on your farm, pick the varieties that you're going to plant, and then pick the areas that you actually need to have that high production from. So it's not one variety suits all. And that's where the beauty, and that's why we sell annuals, we sell Italians, and we sell perennial pasture systems, because they all actually have a different fit in different areas for different farming enterprises.
Okay, Anthony, I might give this one to you. In terms of grazing hay and silage, what should I choose, a tetraploid or a diploid, and does it really make a difference?
Yeah, it does. In the past, we've sort of grouped everything together as just, okay, what's your price on tortilla? That's really a common question that in a store people would get asked, and they're very different from one another. Annuals versus Italians, they have a different purpose, and then you've got diploids and tetraploids on top of that as well. So as Alan explained, the annuals are a lot quicker out of the ground than what the Italians are. So if you're looking for that early winter feed, that's where you would really look at annuals in the system. And within those annuals, if you compared tetraploid and diploids, if you're looking at more grazing pressure on your pastures, then the diploids seem to be able to handle that more. You can graze them down lower than what you can a tetraploid. A tetraploid, having the wider leaf, takes longer to recover back from a heavier grazing. And also, if you are lax in your grazing, you'll let your grasses grow too tall, because the tetraploid has a larger leaf, they tend to lodge easier. So to get the benefits out of the tetraploids of the higher sugar levels, you have to be more concise in your grazing management. If you're not as concise with your grazing management, then I would push you towards diploids, because they can tolerate harder grazing or not as good at grazing when they grow tall. And if I compared then annuals to Italians, if I was looking at using those two species, well, annuals are really good for that winter grazing, and then probably early on in the spring for making silage out of. But then the Italians are really the best species for making hay or late silage from, because they head a little bit later than what the annuals usually do. On average, the annuals head all around about the end of October, whereas a lot of the Italians head between mid to the end of November. So they can extend your season out for longer, so that you maintain the quality longer in those pastures, so to make hay from. So what we tend to find is that for every day that you see a seed head produced in these varieties, you lose 0.5% digestibility. So if you're struggling with getting the right conditions for making hay, and you've planted an annual, you tend to lose, they will lose their quality a lot quicker than what an Italian will, which can hold on later into the system, into the season, sorry. And then same goes with the tetraploids. We all know that tetraploids have a heavier seed, and so to hold that heavier seed up in the seed head, they have to produce a lot more fiber in the stem of the plant to be able to hold the seed head upright. So you tend to find that when you let diploids and tetraploids of the same heading date go to head and produce seed, the diploids tend to maintain their quality longer than what the tetraploids do, because the tetraploids need an extra amount of fiber in the stem to be able to hold that heavier seed upright. So yeah, they all are different. They all have different purposes, and don't just go into a store and say, what's your price on Tortilla? Because if you use each one to their main advantages, you can get a lot more production out of them and be more profitable than what you would be in just saving that extra couple of dollars from sowing Tortilla at the start of the season.
Anthony, can I just add with that, especially with quality silage at the end of the season, that sometimes there is an advantage. People will say that you shouldn't have diploids and tetraploids planted together. You should stick to a monoculture. But if you pick a diploid and a tetraploid with similar maturity heading dates, where they're quite mature, the benefits then for that late season hay and silage can be really beneficial, because you have your diploids that have got more tiller density and lower usually, as you've stated, with the tetraploids being higher and needing a higher seed rank. And then when it comes to that hay and silage period through and late in the season, if they're the same heading dates, you still have the quality of your diploid underneath and the bulk of your tetraploid. So that means that you actually have more quality and quantity through the total pasture sward, and that really can make a difference to your pastures. So when people say only plant monoculture, really consider actually putting diploids and tetraploids together, and then you can really take advantage of that. As long as they're similar heading dates, don't plant an early maturity with a late maturity. Try to get your heading dates as close as possible together, and you can get some really great successes with increasing bulk dry matter and grazing management throughout the season.
Can't hear you, Joe.
Sorry about
Miriam,
that, people. Okay. If planting fescues, is it okay to mix both types? And is there an advantage if you do mix other grasses, or a detriment?
Is that for me, Joe?
I'll throw that out to the panel, I think.
So if you looked at your different fescue types, they have quite a different growth pattern. So you better tune into my talk tomorrow night, and I'll be able to show you in a slide. But the Mediterraneans specifically sort of grow over the autumn, winter, spring period, whereas the summer actives grow over the spring, summer, autumn period. Now you might think, oh well, that's great. If I put them in a mix, they'll grow at different times of the year, and I can take advantage of that. Maybe, like Mediterraneans can tolerate rainfall, annual rainfall down to about 400 to 500 mil, whereas the continentals, or the summer active types, they only tolerate rainfall down to about 600 mil. So if you're mixing them together, you've got to really think about the environment that you're in. Mixtures, it really depends on your type of farming. If you're a farmer that likes to see feed all year round, mixtures work really well under that scenario. if you're a farmer that's wanting to get the maximum amount of production out of each species on your farm, I'm really try to encourage you to put them separate from one another so you can graze them, and the management that you do for that grazing is very specific towards that species. When you start mixing them together, yes, they can complement one another and things like that, but the grazing management gets much more complex when you start to do that, and you start to lose production out of that pasture. So yeah, definitely when you start to see when we really went to extremes and changed, went out of fescues and went to other species that are very different to one another, you start to see a lot of animal grazing preference and all sorts of things like that, which can lead up to some certain species disappearing out of the pasture, and then other ones not being grazed hard enough, and so yeah, it does get very complex. But like I said, it's really about what type of paddock you want. If you want feed all year round, mixtures are good. If you're looking to get the best production, monocultures of grass with a legume in some way are better.
Thank you for that.
Also, if I might add to that, Joe, the issue of planting ryegrass with tall fescue is particularly important because ryegrass is so much more aggressive. It has an allelopathic effect from the roots, which is a system of secreting toxins which suppress the growth of other grasses around them. Tall fescue is particularly susceptible to allelopathic action. And last night on Twitter, for example, there was a bag of seed on Twitter where there was only 20% tall fescue amongst 48% ryegrass. Almost certain what will happen there is the tall fescue just won't make it all the way through. It's an expensive component, better to look after it well and not just blend it all and hope for the best.
And Donald, can I add there that maybe if you're looking, especially with a continental type fescue or the summer active types, that's one of the systems that does work quite well, and they use it on the northern New England tablelands, is to actually put a prairie grass or a brome type with the fescues, which have a winter growth pattern to them, and then the summer active fescues take over. So yeah, like ryegrasses, fescues maybe not, but then there's bromes, herbs and chicories if you're wanting to do into a plant mix to actually spread your pasture system out over the full season.
Thanks for that, everyone. The evening has got away from us. So I'd like to thank everyone for the questions. There is a few more that we will have to get back to people with individually. We'll email out the questions, and also please have a look at the videos on the website. They're got a bit more detail about annuals, Italians and perennials and breeding and what effort goes into Valley Seeds' breeding from Anthony. And before we go, I'd like to thank the panelists and the many people behind the scenes who've helped make this event real. And of course, thank you to the audience for being here and all the supporters of Valley Seeds over the many years. We hope you found this session interesting, and you'll receive a copy of the webinar recording in the next day or two and a survey. Could you please help us by improving this and fill out the survey so we can do it all again bigger and better next time? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for your time. Hope you have a great evening.
See ya.